YouTube, it's me, SDG, and today we'll be doing a new type of video, where basically at the school I go to, we do a musical every year, and this year's musical is Annie. So while I was reading and memorizing the lines of Annie, I started to realize how bad Annie was. Just objectively not well planned. And today I'm going to be hopefully bringing some parts to that of light, of how poorly thought out it really is. And today, as you know, I'll be going over the plot. Okay, so what is the plot of Annie? The plot of Annie it's pretty simple. Mr. Warbucks, who's a billionaire, had, during his climb to his fortune and fame, he had to run over pretty much and climb over a lot of people and kind of like, I don't know. He had to run over a lot of people, not physically, but figuratively. And he had to climb over so that he would be the one with all the money and power. So, feeling guilt, and he decides that over this Christmas, which is, I believe, 1929 or 30. I don't think we know exactly. Actually, it's right around the New Deal, so that'd be around 32, 33. Anyway, the point is that he decides to invite an orphan over for Christmas. There are two main things that you can already tell are wrong with the play. Not just a plot. I mean, you can mainly the plot, but there are elements that you can already tell will make the play just not good. And just a forewarning, this might ruin the play for some people, so if you're a really big fan of Annie and you don't want it to be ruined for you, I don't know if you want to watch the rest of this, but anyway, moving on. The first thing that's wrong with this is that Mr. Warbucks is inviting over an orphan. As I said, this is set during the Great Depression, where there are millions of Americans who are starving and dying, and not only who don't have jobs, but also their children. So Mr. Warbucks thinks it's a good idea to invite a single happy and well-fed orphan. Moving a little deeper on what I mean by happy and well-fed, if you look at what happens during Annie, in the orphanage they're at, there are several other choices that could have been made that would have been far better. So even if Mr. Warbucks is going to be kind of cruel and just pick a single orphan, there would have been so many better choices. Because we see during the orphanage, Annie seems to be one of the children kind of in leadership and kind of almost as a parent figure to a lot of these younger children. In fact, there's a little girl at the orphanage who you could argue is somewhat traumatized because her parents, she never knew anything about her parents. And Annie is constantly having to comfort her. Because if you also don't know much about the play, at the orphanage that Annie is staying at, right? Miss Hannigan, the person in charge of the orphanage, is kind of cruel and mean to the people in the orphanage. So, for Mr. Warbucks to take away that one parent figure and leave those children who, some of which have very awful childhoods with Miss Hannigan, is also arguably pretty cruel, in my opinion. So that's the first issue. The second thing that was wrong with his plan was the time framing of it. We know that Mr. Warbucks only planned to let the orphan stay for Christmas. So what I mean by this is he didn't mean for the orphan to be able to stay for an entire year. No, he meant for him that the orphan to stay for a week. And letting an orphan stay for a week could theoretically cause more hurt than it could help, because at the orphanage they often have to work very hard at Miss Hannigan's orders, but at Mr. Warbucks' mansion, the servants do all the work, and Annie's encouraged not to put in any amount of hard work or effort during her stay. So, if you get used to this to some degree, then having to go back to the orphanage would be rough. And if we dive even further into this, how would it work? Would he just completely cut ties with this? At the end, he does end up adopting Annie, but the idea, the original plan was not supposed to be that, which is also pretty cruel and awful as well. It's very obvious throughout the fleshing out of the plot that it's not well thought out. It might be in some way trying to get people to not hate the very wealthy during the Great Depression, because I believe the musical came out around that time. Maybe that was a part of it. Maybe a part of it was so that the upper class wouldn't be hated. Maybe you're supposed to try and inspire that in some way, but that's possible. But even then, that's still awful. Yeah, so that's going to be the first episode down about the plot. So just so you guys know, I will hopefully be able to upload another video on the weekend. But yeah, that will be it for this video. If you liked it, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share it, and leave any recommendations for any videos at all down in the comments. Thanks. Peace.